Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express, and on this part of the show, we shall be taking a look at the biggest stories that have made headlines from Monday to date. And of course, has a lot to do with COVID-19. We are told this morning, Grafted and KEMSA seeks $5 billion to stay afloat. Donors are starting probes. This is just one of the many incidences that are raising questions on how COVID-19 millionaires are faring on and what's going to happen in terms of bringing them to book. But to reintroduce our guest this morning, we have Joy Brenda Midiva, who's an advocate, as well as Betty Adera of the KANU Women's Congress Nairobi, and Maina Karobia, the chairman for Progressive Future. Welcome to the show, ladies and gent. Or rather, thank you for keeping up with the show. Now, let's start off with a COVID story. COVID profiteers or COVID millionaires or billionaires, if you like. This morning, we're told that KEMSA now is struggling to offset equipment that is overpriced, and now they're seeking permission to sell them at market price to medical facilities and then get 5 billion shillings from the ministry to stay afloat. And as this is going on, other donors who are responsible for them being able to have funds to procure said equipment are looking at them and threatening to withdraw because, of course, something is rotten in Sweden. I'll start with you, Joy. What do you make of this, and what direction should this be going?
Thank you, Trix. One of the things that I think we find unfortunate is lacking in context. So there is something that the the CS actually said recently regarding the KEMSA issue, is that at the time some of this procurement was being done, everything was priced anyway. So if you remember at the beginning of this pandemic, things like sanitizers, masks, we were buying them at quadruple the price.
Yes.
Because the agency and what we're doing. The thing is, for an organization like KEMSA, you would have expected that maybe a little bit of more due diligence would have been done before we got in. But be that as it may, they are stuck with stuff that they bought at extraordinarily high prices that now they cannot dispose of without incurring huge losses. But there is something that Karobia said that I think is the ticket here, that our procurement laws have been drafted with loopholes in them that can be exploited. One of the things that needs to be done, what this COVID has made us realize, is we need to look at our procurement laws and our Public Finance Management Act all over again. There are places where public enterprise is able to weave and loop and say, you know what, on this one, we're going to skip that step and that step because the law allows us to. Leave a loophole, and I'm sure somebody will find a way to exploit it. But be that as it may, there is another thing that needs to be worked out is our IT systems, our procurement systems are not foolproof, they're not tamper-proof.
Right.
And that is, in this day and age, why is our technology not tamper-proof? We need to come to a place where human interference is reduced such that processes are more automated so that you can see every single step. There's a clear paper trail, there is a clear approval trail, so that we always know where the buck stops. Because we will keep singing until the cows come home if everything is still dependent on somebody with a red pen to write okay, somebody to make a phone call and payments can be made. It needs to be removed out of human hands completely so that at least there is a level of assurance. So the frustration with the profiteering is that our laws and our IT systems are designed to fail. They're designed with weaknesses in them. And now we are seeing people exploiting the weaknesses legally so that at the end of the day, we might find very few people are able to be pinned down because they followed the book. Right. And the book had missing pages in it. That's why we have a problem.
Okay. Now, Betty, you mentioned an expose that was aired earlier on that actually caused an uproar. Now, what do you feel about how this is affecting the goodwill of donors towards KEMSA and this country? Because when this type of news comes out, then obviously any reasonable donor would be thinking twice about helping a nation that cannot tame graft. What do you make of this, and how should this be handled?
The situation we are in right now in terms of government relationship with its donors is actually a sad one. And this is not the first time. Remember, for the longest time ever, we've had this donor, that donor, raising red flags, complaining that some of the resources that are put in to help the common mwananchi didn't actually go the way they went. We have had in the past cases where donors actually pull out, demand accountability, and if they do not get that, then there's no deal. Yeah. Now, COVID-19 came in as a global pandemic, and again, it put Kenya into the limelight, and for the uptieth time for the wrong reasons. So remember, when a donor puts in his or her dollar or his or her euro, their thinking is that the best system to put it through is government, because then government has the ultimate responsibility to take care of its citizens, with the hope that the resources are going to be used in a prudent way, and the resources are going to actually cause a difference for good in the common, regular youth, woman, child, of Kenya. But sadly so, the expose, just showed just how rotten, our procurement systems are, just showed how unethical, we are probably. I just showed just how selfish, people are. And remember, because of any even 1 shilling that is stolen, a girl is pregnant because she had to go and sleep with someone to get food for that particular day. Because of every shilling stolen, a youth is now getting into mukokoteni business and not being able to go back to school, even if CS Magoha opens schools. I wonder who will go back, who will be there, to go back to school. So this is actually a serious matter. It is putting us as a people, in a bad limelight. And I'm thinking that for the first time ever, the investigations should be done. The culprits should be brought to book and actually should be charged with crimes against humanity. Because if you take 30-something billion, how many Kenyans could that money, have fed? How many laptops could it have bought so that all kids in Kenya are able to continue, with their education? But I'm thinking this is a time that I would appeal to His Excellency, the President and his co-principal, Senator Gideon Moi, to crack the whip, and just ship everyone who is culpable to where they need to be. Even if it means disbanding KEMSA, so let it be.
Right, and the audit that is ongoing indicates that there are items that are procured upwards of 6 million shillings, or rather 6 billion shillings, could have actually been gotten at upwards of 3 billion shillings, which is quite concerning. Maina, when you see this and the fact that now they're asking to have this now offset at the current market price, which would be okay if they had gotten them around the 3 billion figure, then if they do this, then they would need 5 billion to cushion themselves. That is KEMSA. What do you make of this and all this confusion? And it points to some sort of poor planning or a lack of due diligence at the very least.
You see, I've always been saying that the problem of Kenya that we have today is a governance issue. Whereby, like I said, the issue of Public Management Act and our procurement laws, those are governance issues that we are ailing them. Like, for instance, if I was to ask, what is the role of a donor? Why should a donor come to help us? You see, the donor is coming to help us because there's some needs, or we have inadequacy in some sector. And this inadequacy is deliberately caused by our selfish agenda, or the drive for private gain than the public gain. So I think as much as we are dealing with this issue, we should deal with it from a governance perspective, so that we can move ahead and now start actually be self-sustaining or self-sufficient, and without necessarily needing the help of these donors. Because you see, even as much as these donors come on board, they come on board with some conditions which you have to meet as a country. So you are compelled to meet some conditions that you might sometimes actually compromise your security or your economic objectives when you're interacting with other states or with other international partners. So I think we need to be very proactive in terms of our governance issues and governance structure, so that we can improve the state of dealing with this country.
Right.
Again, I also want to say this. The duty bearers, that is the the agencies such as DCI, EACC, even the president himself, because the buck stops with the president. It needs to be very categorical. Don't let people to misuse your name or misuse the friendship that you have with them. Because you see, some of the names that we have seen been mentioned in this KEMSA case, or this COVID pandemic crisis, the people who have been profiting from it, they are actually people who quote the president's name at the hint of which engagement they are in, politically and economically. So the president needs to shed off this blanket of friendship and lead this country objectively, without necessarily treating friends and business partners with the kids' growth, so that we can move ahead. Because, for instance, if I'm not close to the president and I see somebody else who is close to the president profiting from a pandemic as we are in, then I will start revolting. I will start actually questioning the legitimacy of this government, because I can see the government is selective in terms of applying the laws. So I think the president should actually realize and appreciate that the buck stops with him. He should shed off the blanket of friendship.
Yes, you have made that
as
point.
The president
I'd
of the
like
Republic of Kenya.
Joy's opinion on this one. Joy, could you tell us, let's talk about accountability, and that is put on the back of the press, it's put on the law enforcers, also bodies such as the EACC. Did we give them too much leniency? Did we put too much faith in them so that this is happening at a time where this 6 billion that is being quoted here in the papers and as per that audit is already gone? So did we not ask enough questions at the time?
I think when a pandemic is starting or when you're in the middle of a crisis, sometimes you suspend normal operations and do what you need to do in an emergency.
Yes.
So at that, I guess there was not enough time for the usual scrutiny and processes that we usually use. But what I would expect to see now is a looking back. So for the EACC, for the investigative arms, even within the Office of the Auditor General, I would expect now that the scrutineering would start, such that even if it takes us 1 year down the line, let us find out exactly what happened, who took what, where did it go, and hold these people to account. But let me just allow me to give you a little bit of a snippet back into something that we are overlooking, is that a lot of the money was also locally donated. The people within the country who do not have the machinery of the international community to place conditionalities or to have a monitoring and evaluation, who actually took money from their own coffers and contributed. Local businesses that contributed, people who sacrificed the little that they had to try and help their brothers out. Now, when you abuse people's trust to this level, something must give.
Right.
There must be accountability. And that's why when I'm talking about people like EACC, I don't just expect them to look at the money that the donors brought because we stand to lose standing in the international community. What about Kenyans? Because Kenyans have turned out time and time again to support their fellow countrymen. We saw Kenyans for Kenyans drive, even in this COVID one. You saw a lot of money being raised within a very short time. So this abuse of trust has to be dealt with once and for all. But the last point I want to underscore, bailing out people who have failed to do their duty is something we should never do. The taxpayer should not pay for ineptitude and inefficiencies and discrepancies that are caused by people who have refused to do their work properly. So if KEMSA is 5 billion in the drink, let them drown. Why? Because we have to get to a place where we let some of these organizations feel the pinch for their ineptitude and their inefficiency. This is time to let people bear the cross of their own actions.
Yes,
because we have to get to a point where we say, you know what, enough is enough. We will not keep throwing good money after bad money just to make you look good.
Yes.
Enough is enough. And don't have this money to spend anyway.
Okay. Now, Betty Adera, as this goes on, health workers have had enough, and now we are having a strike notice that was issued, and the strike is on as of last night at midnight. Well, that is today, basically, and 21-day strike notices have been given in other parts of the country. What do you make of this, and how are we handling this? The timing couldn't be worse for a strike, particularly at a time when you're trying to fight off COVID-19, and they are really needed, but at the same time, they do have needs that are clearly not being met.
Nurses the world over bear the backbone of a healthcare system in any democracy. Without a nurse in a health facility, even if you put there 20 doctors, they're going to do nothing. The laboratory people will do nothing. All these other health specialists will do nothing without a nurse in the room. So nurses are, if you ask me, in the healthcare service delivery structures, the most important human resource in service delivery.
Yeah.
And if nurses are not okay, if they are not motivated the right way, if they're not remunerated the right way, if they're not given a conducive working environment, if they're not given the correct, apparatus and equipment and protection, to do their work, then we have a big problem. This would not be the first time that nurses, in Kenya have threatened or actually, conducted an industrial action. And the timing of it is also just making me get into a panic mode, as a Kenyan, because we are still in the thick, of COVID-19 pandemic, where nurses are super crucial. But we have also seen nurses as other healthcare workers, get sick because of COVID, die and get buried because of COVID. Why? Just because of the same corruption issue, that we are talking about, and they're not able to be given the correct protective equipment that they need to have, to deal with us and to take care of us when we are sick, especially now, even with COVID. I want to believe that whenever there's an industrial action, dialogue somewhere has failed.
Yeah.
Right? That is why now they go to the extreme. It's like we have no choice. And this is not a time for anyone to shut the dialogue door. This is not a time to do that. So if it is the sector, the health sector and all the sectors, involved in ensuring health service delivery with nurses on the front line, I just make an appeal. I'm literally almost on my knees, appealing to them to go back to the dialogue table, to the conversation table, and see ways in which they can get some middle ground, so that at the end of the day, if a woman needs, healthcare service to deliver a baby, she will not die or lose her baby just because there is no nurse, in the health facility to attend to.
And remember, Nairobi is the epicenter still of the pandemic, rather that Kenya's part of in this pandemic. Now, when you see this, and at the same time we're having people calling for protests in the city just in relation to what is happening, it seems like a mess, Maina. What do you make of this and the possibility, or rather the promise, that this particular strike is going to rope in the Kenyatta National Hospital as a facility that is depended upon by so many people?
One thing is that corruption has extensive ramifications in any society. You'll see that you actually see, maybe some of the reasons as to why these nurses are calling for industrial actions is because of the expose that they saw on the weekend. So they are asking themselves, this money is actually set to be spent on right channels, but now to me, it seems a big chunk of these resources that have been set to counter this or to contain this pandemic is actually getting into individuals' pockets. So I think some of these things, they lead to serious consequences, such as this industrial action that you are witnessing from the nurses. The other thing is that I think the nurses, the body that leads this, that advocates for the interests of these nurses, should actually approach this issue from a rational point of view.
But how rational can you be, Maina, when there are places where these medical workers have not been paid for over 10 months? I mean,
so they should actually, even as much as they should actually ask themselves, when they protest, there will be cases of increase of these COVID cases, because there will be no social distance.
That's
you understand
true.
when there is a multitude, people don't actually have that rational mind to social distance. They should also ask themselves, there are already cases that we have in our health facilities. We are going to find people who might even die because they don't have caregivers or they don't have people to look after them. We might also see cases whereby the whole health sector, like Andrea said, the nurses are the most important cog in terms in the health system. So when you don't have such individual or such human resource, it means the whole the whole health sector or health system is going to collapse. So I think the body that reads or advocates for health nurses' interest, they should come on board. They push for a dialogue with the duty bearers in the ministry so that their interests or their issues can be addressed. Because this is a national issue. This is not an individual issue or even a particular profession issue. It is a national issue, and the most important people in this fight, it is the health practitioners, particularly the nurses.
Okay. Now, Joy, another story that has made headlines the whole week is that what has been happening with the senators, some of them were rounded up, and speculation is that because of their position in the revenue allocation formula. Your comments on that story and how it seems to have taken a new twist?
Yesterday and the day before yesterday were very interesting in terms of looking at this story, because you have a situation where we start asking the question, so who ordered this? And everybody's saying it wasn't me, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. But with the caliber of officers that we saw involved in the operation, the timing, the execution, the everybody being repatriated to the country of origin, it tells me that there was actually a plan. It was not random things that just happened. There was actually a system in place that made this happen. We started in the first hour with Michael talking about the power brokers. And sometimes when a government official comes and says, you know what, I'm not the one who ordered this, and he's in charge of the people who are in charge of the officers, then that tells you, okay, then who ordered it? The commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Kenya would not do such a thing because he took oath before all of us. And in this matter, if it was him, I'm sure by now he would have said, you know what, I'm the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces and I did it. So who did? That tells me that there are some people who are outside what we would consider the laid down, you know, the duty bearers, as Maina Karobia correctly puts them, and that they're able to make calls that make things happen. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yes.
And when you've got this system, this hand that you cannot see, that can move such important things happen to very senior members of our society, then you realize that there is power that lies outside of the power. And this is a very worrying thing. I think time has come for us to look at this. It's a failure in enforcing our constitution, where the principle of separation of powers is paramount. We have to respect the duty that the Senate plays. We have to respect the duty that the executive plays, and they have to remain separate of necessity. And also in this entire process, you cannot forget the fact that this would have been a situation where people would have rushed to court to get orders to prevent these guys from being arrested. But look at where we are now with COVID being what it is. On that same day, Bomet Law Court was shut down because of COVID. The Kakamega Law Court was shut down because of COVID. In Nairobi also, most of the courts have scaled back operations because of COVID. So we are at a place where none of our arms of government is functioning as should be. I think what we have learned in this situation is if we do not respect institutions, then when we need them, they fail us. And I hope the Senate has learned a lesson. This dalliance with the executive has weakened them. And now that they needed to rise up to the challenge, they were unable to because they find themselves beholden by powers outside the House itself. So it is an opportunity also for the Senate to reclaim their space and to reclaim their authority and say, you know what, on this particular score, we are in the driving seat. That is why 10 tribes have been unable to move us. In this 11th tribe, let us move ourselves. So I hope the 12-man committee will be able to yield something for Kenyans. 11th time lucky.
Yeah. Now, Betty, just on that comment that Joy has made about the Senate having a dalliance with the executive and suffering for it, we had the senators summoning CS Fred Matiang'i to answer to some of the incidents that have happened this week. But then when the CS showed up, they were less than impressive in the way they handled that situation. What do you make of that? And do you think they are compromised owing to their relation to the executive?
Thank you for that question. And I'll just say this: in politics, nothing happens by chance, and nothing just happens because it was just a mere coincidence. And when we saw CS Matiang'i walk in, and like the senators are beginning to chicken, it's like a king has come, into the room, and everyone else is suddenly a subject and almost shivering and wanting to align. Then you wonder, wait a minute, so who summoned who? Who summoned who? Right? That is question number one. Question number two is then that with that kind of reaction that we saw, what is the objective of this meeting? What is it actually going to achieve? But one thing we have to also give Senate is that then, they're doing, what they can, to convince us, as Kenyans, that they still, hold the seat that they occupy, in Senate, and they can summon CSS, to come and answer to a couple of questions. And you see, as Joy said, at the end of the day, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Then who was it? It was no one. And to me, that meeting, achieved zero objective.
Okay.
What was it supposed to do? Nothing. It did nothing. Whatever it is they hoped to do, they actually, they didn't achieve it.
Okay.
But having said that, I want to just make a couple of comments again.
Just briefly, because we have run out of time, Betty.
Okay.
Actually, we have run out of time, so I won't be able to allow you to continue. But thank you so much to Joy Brenda Medivos, who's an advocate, Betty Adera of the KANU Women's Congress Nairobi, and Maina Karobia, Chairman for Progressive Future. Thank you so much for being a part of the show this morning and giving your very insightful